All right, so today we have a very special guest who is on a mission to make NFTs safe, secure, and legal. When I first heard of this, I was really curious and interested how anyone could possibly get something like this done in the current environment of NFTs. So, without further ado, here is Casey Kuhlman, the CEO of Monax Labs. Hello, Casey. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me today.
Great. So when I first came across what you guys were doing, it was courtesy of my friend Jeremy, who's now part of your team. And he was saying that what you guys were basically doing was you were going to take this world of NFTs, this Wild West scenario on OpenSea where people are getting their stuff stolen out of their wallets, scams going on left and right all the time. And you were going to somehow create some kind of legal protection for your NFTs. And the first thing I thought about with that was, how in the world could you possibly do such a thing? So why don't we start there?
We may end here. I don't know. There's a lot of complexity in that statement, but let's take a stab at summarizing. So, if we think about the structure, the sort of code structure of an NFT today, there are really three fundamental, I would call them business problems. If you're looking to be a creator and do something interesting with NFTs, maybe you want to bring existing IP into NFT forms, or maybe you want to bring new intellectual property into NFT forms. You're probably going to have three things that are going to jump out at you, and these are structural, as I said, with the way that we as an ecosystem have architected NFTs at a code level. So just as a background, I've been building at the intersection of legal tech and blockchain tech since 2014 when I first got involved, and our company Monax Labs was working in permission blockchain space, and then in smart contract system space, and then in contract management space, and so now where we're really focused on is leveraging all of that learning to potentially re-architect the way that NFTs work today in some particular ways that will solve these three problems. So the three problems that we see fundamentally are: first, there is an inability to provide assurances around royalties. If most of the business reason that folks are that large Hollywood actors, big fashion houses, luxury brands, and other holders of significant portfolios of intellectual property are extremely interested in intellectual property, just to cut to the chase, is that it's a new revenue stream. That at the end of the day, that is very interesting. The problem, though, is that there are challenges if you're seeking to help those older companies bring their intellectual property into an NFT ecosystem. One of the challenges that you're going to have to overcome is the fact that you cannot say to them with any level of assurance that okay, this idea of downstream royalties on secondary sales is going to be helped. We're going to live up to this idea that royalties will get paid, because the dirty little secret in NFTs is that this is that marketplaces can choose to apply royalties or can not. In various ways, apply royalties. The biggest actor in the Ethereum ecosystem, for example, has a completely off-chain, completely unenforced, outside of their own centralized systems, royalties mechanism, which isn't ideal if you're trying to build stuff in a decentralized manner. So that's one big challenge that you have from a business perspective. Another big challenge that you have from a business perspective is that you have a real challenge challenge to understand that to build any interesting transaction types, you need to understand that there's a difference in the real world between owning something and possessing something. And blockchains in blockchain ecosystems have grown up under this idea of owning your own keys, be your own bank, and if the thing is in my wallet, then the thing is in my wallet and I have exclusive control over it.
Hmm.
And that is interesting and different from a lot of other way that a lot of other systems have, but it also limits what we can do creatively. If, for example, you come obviously from the Top Shots community, and everybody knows that in the Top Shots community, making sort of there's a gray market industry of people loaning other people their NFTs, and in order to do that, they transfer the NFTs to them, and it is a big challenge to know with any sort of certainty that you're going to be able to get those NFTs back. And I often analogize to the real world, where if I give you the keys to my car, it doesn't mean that you own my car. If you're driving my car around and it's stolen from you, they're not going to bring my car back to you when the police find it. They're going to bring it back to me because I'm the registered legal owner of this particular this car.
Hmm.
And in the Ethereum ecosystem, at least, and in other ecosystems, we have many NFTs that are much more valuable than most people's cars today. And yet
Hmm.
we still have this notion that that ownership and possession are the same thing, which drastically limits a bunch of things. It limits what we can do in terms of creative transaction types. So if I wanted to, if I had an in-game asset that I wanted to lease to you to play, it's hard. It's going to be extremely hard for me to do that in a permissionless manner. I'm essentially going to have to transfer it to you and then just trust that you're going to send it back to me when you're done playing, using that asset in a particular game.
Right.
Similarly with Top Shots collections, and so that is, and then the other big problem that you have here is that if something gets fished out of your wallet, if an NFT gets fished out of your wallet, there is no real recompense. There's no established mechanism for anybody to make you whole. You're just kind of out of luck at that point, and all of our, as an ecosystem, all of our collective response to that is, meh, sorry, you shouldn't have gotten fished, which is a bit harsh.
No,
when
I
you think
agree. I agree. It's incredibly
about
harsh,
it.
but that's the biggest thing that I can't get my head around, which is that if I fish your wallet and I send you to a fake marketplace and you enter your seed phrase and then I steal everything out of your wallet and then I go sell it to somebody else, um, how are we going to completely change the way this is all working right now? The way that everyone understands the way that this works, the way marketplaces work, the way you can get your stuff robbed and sold elsewhere, and you're kind of out of luck. How's that? How are we going to get over that as a massive community with billions of dollars of Ethereum switching hands every day, and everyone's their own bank, like you said? How are we going to retrain everyone who's used to trading in this way and understanding these risks?
We need to provide a different set of opportunities for how transaction flows operate. It used to be the case that you could buy a car without any sort of needing to do any registration with anybody else.
Hmm.
Blockchainers think it's heresy that I'm about to analogize to states, but in any event, I'm going to. But now, over time, we realized that became problematic, and we needed to figure out a mechanism to separate ownership from possession. And so, vehicle registration became a thing with the state, and it became a thing for safety and insurance reasons as well as ownership reasons. But ownership was a piece of it, and so the this needs to be. It's not going to be easy to change this idea. Number one, the first thing that needs to change, in my view, is that communities need to collectively develop some response besides meh, sorry, human, that thing happened to you, which
But how
is
does that?
a collective response to
Right.
up till now,
Right.
right?
No, I agree. I understand, but isn't that just a symptom of a decentralized marketplace?
It could be, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. So let me paint a different picture of what could potentially happen down the road. So down the road, let's say I had an NFT fished from my wallet, and let's say that the community in which that NFT came from, and it was a high value NFT. It was, it wasn't a $50 NFT. It was a $50,000 NFT that had significant value to it. And let's say that the community behind that had developed a policy that allowed for a decentralized adjudication and understanding that something bad happened, that something was actually stolen out of my wallet, as in the real world we understand something to be stolen from you. And let's say that I went through that adjudication process, and however it was structured by that particular community, and that particular community said at the end of it, yes, we agree that this has been stolen out of your wallet, and therefore we're going to allow you to mint a new NFT that will, let's say the old NFTs token ID was 1111. So let's say this will be 101111 or 2011 or whatever the case might be. We're going to right click, save the content, upload it in, and then we're going to put a marker on the old token ID that we will ask all of the decentralized marketplaces to abide by, that has been stolen. And then we will, and then you have an opportunity to be made whole, in theory, because we've minted something new into your wallet. Whether the market will, and then that can be tradable on decentralized marketplaces.
Right.
Now, there's a long way between here and there, but that road is not. But that story, A, is not unachievable. B, is not any more centralized, and C doesn't require any sort of state or centralized actor in the way that we currently think about those systems, in order to achieve. And B and D would be a lot more welcoming to folks than the current response, which is you're out of luck. Sorry.
What about I think my only concern with that is, and I like the idea. I mean, it would be nice to be able to sleep easier at night knowing that if someone stole stuff out of your wallet, there you had recourse. But I kind of worry about like bad actors. I worry about people who would who do insurance fraud, who burn their house down, who their friend comes in and breaks their windows and steals their TV. Like, how would you
Sure.
be able to stop something like that?
Maybe you would, maybe you wouldn't. I mean, at the end of the day, humans are humans, and a lot of a lot of what I used to be a lawyer, and let me step back and answer the question differently.
Yeah.
I used to be a lawyer, and very little of law is understanding particular rules, and most of law is understanding weird stuff that you never would have thought happened, that humans figured out how to do, and then figuring out how those weird things apply to a particular rule framework. And that's what we're talking about here. So I totally hear you that weird things will happen. Fraud will happen. People will game the system. But that's a matter to me, coming from a legal background, that I just think is, well, that's a mechanism that needs to be taken into account when you set up the adjudication process. You need to understand what evidence you're looking at in order to see. And the good thing about this is, well, we have a global permanent record of a whole bunch of transactions that give us a ton of evidence as to the context around various things if we choose to use those. And so that is very helpful in an instance like this. And it is certainly the case that that there will be negative outcomes if, for example, a fictional community were to get stood up and their NFTs were to become blue chips and they were to put in place a mechanism, something along what I described. And they would have bad actors game the system, and then what would at the end of the day be the result that you would really worry about? I guess the result that you would be worried about would be that you potentially have two NFTs with the same content that, until all of the marketplaces that service that particular chain where that collection lives had understood the sort of black mark applied by the decentralized adjudication system on the old one, until, if that wasn't the case, then you would have two things tradable. I mean, if we had a mechanism like that, would that really deteriorate the value of either of those particular tokens? Well, hopefully, it would deteriorate completely the value of the quote unquote blacklisted token, but the new token would trade just as the old one had traded, and hopefully and I think most likely all of the other tokens within the collection would trade without having their value affected. So like what is really the outcome there? You have a replacement of the old one, and then the old one still exists on chain, but if no marketplace really allows for it, if no marketplace that has decent liquidity around it allows trading of that token, then I don't really see what you've lost, basically,
Mm.
other than maybe the time and potential opportunity cost in the adjudication itself.
Yeah, it's definitely an interesting idea. I mean, I think um, I wonder if every project would have that capacity to be able to like have this whole process and have people in charge and have, like I think a big part of what's attractive about the way things work now is, um, transactions are fast. These are like lean teams in especially when we're talking about transactions, there are no teams involved really. It just happens on its own. So it would be a big like sea change of thinking around this whole thing. Where my head went actually when you first started talking about this though was, I know you have a marketplace that you're working on. I know that there's a focus there on play to earn. But I was actually wondering if this idea that you're speaking of, it would be a tall task, but like if you had a marketplace that had these kind of functionalities built in, where again, it does become a little more centralized because let's say each side had to do something on the marketplace, like almost like a swap website does now, where each side would have to like sign something and agree to it, and it would be like impossible for a bad actor to be able to do it from both sides or something like that. um, that's actually where my head went. And that way you don't involve human error, you don't involve bad actors, you don't involve people with that opportunity cost of wasted time, let's say, or teams that don't have that capacity, and it's all just built in as a functionality into a marketplace. That to me would be even better, but of course that would be probably it would be a challenge to get everyone to then agree that this is where they're going to start buying and selling. I mean, we're seeing it right now with new competitors in the space. So I guess that means that perhaps something like that is doable one day.
I mean, what you described is, for example, Nifty Gateway's approach. So they're a custodian solution that allows folks to trade approved things on their quote unquote marketplace in a custodial manner. Because it's custodial, they have complete control as a company of being able to say, no, Tandy, you didn't actually properly buy that NFT from me, and we're going to change ownership um, back to me. whatever the case might be. But so they have taken that approach, which folks, which seems to be, which is certainly one way to approach the problem set. Another way to approach the problem set is somewhere in between the original story that I told and then what you mentioned, which is what we do, which is we add a range of evidence around transactions that is over and above existing decentralized marketplace mechanisms. And then that enables us to say with a little bit more certainty that a transaction occurred, but still, not we're still not there as an ecosystem. And I mean, there's a couple of solutions that you can address from a technical side, but at the end of the day, technical solutions are going to remain imperfect. And I totally agree with you that it's great that NFT teams are able to raise really good seed rounds for their small teams, and then start to build out their brands based upon those initial drops and raising a couple $1 million. That's great. My next question is, if we're assuming that the team that has built a collection is seeking to build a brand and is not doing a cash grab type thing, set those people aside for a minute. But let's say that you have legitimate actors, then part of building a brand is building your community. And part of building your community is what do you say to people that are suddenly finding themselves, from their perspective, by no fault of their own, suddenly without those NFTs. If you have a Bored Ape stolen out of your wallet, whatever the mechanism may be, are you no longer a member of the club? Is that the stance of Yuga Labs? That bye, see you later. You're gone. You're no longer a member of this community. If I was in that position of being of building a community, I wouldn't think that would be a particularly good outcome in terms of building my community. And so I get that many NFT teams are lean, but I also get that if they're trying to build long-term communities with longevity that welcome more folks that have money that may not be super deep in the technical nuances that everyone that trades NFTs today has to be, then some changes are going to have to get made by those NFT communities and the builders of those communities. And if they choose not to, then we're just going to stay where we are today. And we're going to stay with the same linear growth of folks entering the NFT ecosystem, and at least at the high levels, growth is pretty linear when you look at the wallet numbers of wallets that own blue chips. It certainly is not exponential yet, and that's how the growth is going to stay until we really get actual real money coming into the ecosystem. And I don't think we're going to get that without some level of protection across a range of different dimensions.
I think that's actually a really good point, which is that the real big spenders, like the big funds and things like that, if they have the keys at their own, they can lose those keys, they can lose those assets. I mean, that's such a different situation and such a scary scenario that the minute one of those guys loses their $200,000 Bored Ape, the whole system and on that side of things, that whole segment doesn't stay here and doesn't want to enter again. What surprises me though is that I've been in this space for quite a while, and I can't recall any blue chip ever taking action like that you've described. And I don't know if you have any stories about that, but that is a little bit surprising to me when I think about it, because these blue chips are obviously aware of how high their valuations are and how much money someone is putting in when they join at this time when you're thinking about a Bored Ape or like a Clone X or any of these really high valued NFTs. And yet I can't recall anything like that. The only thing that I can possibly recall are on smaller scales when someone gets ripped off, the community itself bands together, but definitely not with those massive blue chips, though. And why do you think that is? Because what you're saying doesn't seem too crazy to me. It's if they are building this massive brand, then why have we not heard of this at all in the last year?
I think there's a couple of reasons for that. First, just in the lost keys scenario, there's technical solutions for that funds use today, such as Fireblocks and other things that are that's mostly handled at least at the institutional or fund level. The challenge that those institutions have in order to engage with NFT communities at the top levels on non-personal accounts is that they lack assurances that they're not buying stolen property. And so if you are a regulated entity, a fund, and you buy a Bored Ape that, for example, has been stolen, then you have a bad asset on your balance sheet, and that is just largely unacceptable to most regulated funds, and they will face fines in that instance. And so that's the real challenge, is that they don't have an ability to get kind of a clean risk score around Bored Ape 1, 2, 3, 4 that hasn't been stolen. But back to the great way that you put that question. There have been attempts at there have been attempts at the marketplace level to handle this. At least OpenSea has
Right.
attempted to do some things here. If you ask me, they've done it in a little bit of a haphazard way. There's no transparency around why or how they do things, and also it's an imperfect solution because it only addresses their marketplace. It doesn't address Rarible or LooksRare or X2Y2 or any other marketplace that may try to be a good actor and trades Ethereum L1 NFTs.
Hmm.
So my perspective is that this is less of a marketplace's job. Marketplaces probably do, like, particularly as OpenSea gets bigger and even more under the regulatory spotlight, it will have some folks that will demand that they will have some safety mechanisms in place here. But I think the bigger and more interesting question is how can we think about this being a brand or collection responsibility as opposed to a marketplace's responsibility? And the reason that I think nobody has thought about this is because, at least on the older blue chips, CyberKongs, VFriends, Bored Apes, all their smart contracts are basically in place, and nobody wants to migrate their smart contracts. That's not great. And the only way to really actually fundamentally do this is to re-architect the way that your smart contract that controls your NFT collection works at a core level. And when they built those, this wasn't as much in the spotlight. We didn't have all the evidence that we have today of OpenSea getting taken to court by a former Bored Ape holder, which came to light this week and was very interesting. But we just don't have all of that evidence of these bad things happening. Those that have come later, I think basically they just haven't asked themselves. Maybe they haven't asked themselves this question, and as to why they haven't, I don't know. Because I mean, I certainly would be if I was the founder of an NFT collection. I would very much be trying to understand what happens when bad things happen to my community. It would be kind of top of my mind. So I'm not sure. I mean, some of the older folks, I think I would personally give them a pass, because we just didn't have the evidence of things happening then. But if you're trying to build a blue chip today, and you're not, if Invisible Friends just launched a great floor price, pre-reveal. If I was in their shoes, would I be thinking about this after having raised multiple $1 million? Yes, I certainly would. And I would be thinking about it very, very much.
So on your side, then, what are your next steps? Are you reaching out to any of these projects and trying to get them to like dabble in this idea, or how are you guys working on this?
It's a little bit too early. To be honest, I don't think it's a pain point right now for the communities themselves. I think this is a drum that we need to address with new communities. The challenge with existing communities that you have is, and we talked to quite a few. They essentially think it's either not their problem as a community, or because they think that it's your problem for getting fished or whatever, or they take the perspective that which was where you started. Your very first thing was, oh well, bad actors are going to game this, so therefore it's not worth doing. And so the responses that we have gotten from communities to date have fallen cleanly within one of those two. So how we are addressing it today is we're starting with new communities that are seeking to build new and interesting NFT communities and experiences, and we're giving them the capabilities to do these new and interesting things within the NFTs that they mint with us. So we talked a little bit that we have a marketplace, that my company makes a marketplace. We also make we also have a professional grade NFT publishing platform, and so most of what we're doing in this area is coming from the publishing platform side rather than the marketplace side, because I think it fundamentally is a question of how you build your community from the start rather than how a marketplace structures itself.
So when you're talking about ways that you give them this kind of control and these kind of like levers that they can change, this is directly, you're talking about this publishing platform of yours, and they're doing that within that publishing platform.
Yeah.
So it's something that's residing inside of the smart contract, or what are they actually creating inside the publishing platform that then allows them to have this kind of a safeguard in place?
It's a structure of how the NFT smart contract that underlies the collection operates. So you need to give yourself, as a community, an ability to do things like mark something as being stolen,
Okay.
and or mint a new one. Depends on kind of what you think your attack vectors are, what you're worried about. But our NFT publishing platform, what it does is essentially it will have a whole collection that will come out of it from the smart contract level up to the content level, and the users of that platform have an ability to turn a variety of knobs that they may want. Another knob that we haven't really talked about is that anybody doing anything interesting around licensing is doing it wrong today, and is going to find that out very, very quickly when courts start ruling against the fact that they have actually put those quote unquote rights into their into the NFTs. So that's another thing that we solve within our publishing platform as well. So we have all these kind of knobs that someone can turn on or off if they're worried about this thing or that thing, and then what comes out of that is a smart contract that controls the collection and all the content around the collection.
Wow. Well, I mean, I have a lot of questions still, but I think, are you almost at time? How much more time do you have?
Yes.
All right. Well, if you're almost at time, then
I
I
can go
feel
to the
like,
bottom of the hour. I moved the meeting so I can go to the
okay,
bottom of the hour.
okay. So something you just said, which is really interesting to me, and I don't know if I interpreted correctly or not, but you said about like the licensing side. Does this have to do with the CC0 idea where I think I'm saying that right, where the if you
Yeah.
buy an NFT, you can then like create whatever you want because it's CC0 with your NFT. Is that what you're referencing or no?
So these are very closely aligned. Just to have a simple response, one of the things that is, for example, different between punks and apes is that punks have said you don't have you, a collector, do not have downstream rights to be able to monetize or do things with your punk just because you hold it in your wallet.
Right.
Whereas the apes have said you, as a collector, have an ability to do interesting things. You can license it, you can do different things. The
Hmm.
problem that both of those communities are going to have is that probably neither is the result that courts are going to apply. Courts have rules around anything that is licensing or rights reservations that are outside the kind of defaults within any one country or area. The EU has a common area in this, but they around one jurisdiction. If you want to do anything that's outside the defaults, then you need to have evidence that someone has had an opportunity to understand and then agree to those things. So when we go and sign up to a new website today, before we do basically anything else other than maybe give me your email, we have a long set of legalese that we have to scroll to the bottom of, tick the tick box, and say I agree to this. Now, this gives the platform evidence that someone has been able to see, read, and whether they read or not is immaterial, and agree to and affirmatively agree to those terms. Now, in NFT land, we've got an NFT that's getting sold over here on some secondary marketplace. And then you may or may not have a set of terms that are over on Larva Labs or Yuga Labs website that are claiming to be a part of that. The challenge that both of those companies have, and anybody in NFT land has, is that they completely lack evidence that anyone that has purchased or collected the NFT has been given an opportunity to read those terms and has affirmatively agreed to those terms.
Mm.
And so, what the courts are going to do, most likely, in the absence of those, is they're going to say, well, okay, whatever's on that website is completely irrelevant to us. We're just going to apply whatever the default is in this particular case. And so, because it will be as if nothing was written on the website. And so that's how things are going to get played. And it's not going to be in the default rule mostly is not you can do whatever you want with it. So, like, the challenges are going to be that it's going to be on the opposite end of the spectrum. It's that you have very little, as a collector, you have very little capability to do anything interesting. That's the legal default in most places. Hard to say globally exactly what the default is, but and so this is another core architecture problem with the way that NFTs are constructed today.
That would be, to me, that seems like a much easier, more easily understood offering, honestly. If
It
I
is.
have, yeah, like if you build a platform where you fill up that legalese for me, I upload my rights to my NFT, and then I send that person to that platform to now agree so that we can properly create some kind of a loaning mechanism or licensing mechanism or something like that. To me, that makes a lot of sense. I think, yeah, it's a much easier hill to climb, I think, than the first example. And maybe for that reason, getting people familiar with these sort of outside resolutions would start on something like that, because to me that makes a lot of sense. So
Yeah.
that's great that you guys are thinking about that. So do you want to talk at all then about, well, actually I have one actually follow up, the publishing platform, just so I properly understand, is that like soup to nuts? If I want to create an NFT, I go to your publishing platform and you can connect all the dots for me, or is this a scenario where I have my collection already and then I go to your platform?
You would need the content already.
Okay, gotcha.
It's not. We don't do like we don't help you create the content. You would need to have the content ready to go. Once you have the content ready to go, then yes, it's kind of soup to nuts. Once you have the content.
Got it. So it's more about like the smart contract, and since you're coming from that legal side, it's getting all your legal stuff in a row, and um, it's like those generators online when you do legal things and need to, like you said, push certain buttons to have certain controls and such. It sounds like that's what you're talking about.
Exactly. It's if anyone's been to like OpenSea's sort of self-publishing, self-minting thing, it's like that, except like a lot more, uh, a lot more souped up and has a lot more capabilities than they built into their publishing system.
And then from there, does it connect to whatever marketplace you want, or is it connecting to your own marketplace, or where is it connecting to?
Well, if you're in Ethereum land, it would connect to every marketplace. So because it marketplaces just automatically read the chain,
Got it.
and any new collection that comes out, they automatically index. So it would be automatically available.
Okay, I actually wasn't aware of that. Because I thought that looks rare. You had to like import your project, unless that's a different thing because it's wrapped. I don't really know, but anyhow, I think that answers the question for now. Um, do you want to talk at all in these last few minutes about this play to earn idea?
Yeah, sure. So play to earn is interesting. In my opinion, play to earn is going to be what unlocks institutional liquidity to come into the Ethereum. I mean, sorry, into the NFT ecosystem, not into the Ethereum ecosystem. It's already there. And the reason that I say that is that play to earn assets are super cool. If you tell somebody that has been, trading Bitcoin for professionally for a few basis points, that suddenly they get to trade spaceships for 200 basis points, that's going to be pretty cool.
Yeah,
And it's certainly going to be more cool than like, okay, my balance of Bitcoin went from this to that, because now you got a cool spaceship. And but not only do you have a cool spaceship, but that cool spaceship, it's going to have capital appreciation or deterioration depending on the value of the asset going up or down. But it also is going to get you yield. It will also, if you have it staked and then played in game, you're going to get a certain yield from that in-game asset. And for this reason, I think this is going to be the year that we're going to start to see massive institutional money move into the NFT ecosystem, and predominantly into the play to earn side of the ecosystem. Because a PFP, at the end of the day, why would institutional money come into a PFP project? Here and there, certainly, and particularly at the top end
yeah,
of the blue chips, you'll have OTC desks that will have family offices of very affluent clients that will say, go get me a Bored Ape, and they'll go get them a Bored Ape, and that will happen here and there, but it's not particular. But you're not going to. I don't think you're going to see large institutions making markets in Bored Apes, for example, or other NFTs that are pure PFPs. I think where we will see markets being made is in gaming assets, because, for example, they have a yield. So if this asset is on your balance sheet, you have two ways to make money on it. You can make money by capital appreciation of the asset itself, or you can make money on the yield. And so this gives you a much more interesting lead in to this ecosystem, and number one. And then number two, it gives you multiple ways to actually kind of quote unquote play the asset, not from a gaming perspective, but from a trading aspect. And so now you can develop more complex strategies. You can you can have more interesting ways to do things with the asset. And so that's why I think this year we're going to start to see very, very interesting things. So our our product Aspen is built to be really the intersection of where institutional money and NFT gaming assets meet. And so we've built the marketplace with this idea in mind.
So is the idea then that this will be a marketplace that is like a niche marketplace that only holds assets that have that element to them?
That's where we're going to start.
Okay.
And these assets are very interesting because you need to there's a real tangible need to do to manage your yield, to be able to do things like lease them or loan them out to others that may actually play the game that is going to increase your yield, etc. And so because you have different you have much more interesting dynamics around how the assets actually work rather than simply I'm buying. I mean, what can you do with a board ape that's interesting? You can buy it, sell it, or swap it. Like that's not particularly interesting from a transactional perspective. But if you have a sappy seal that someone else wants to play, but you want to get some of their token while their play, or some of their winnings while they play, that makes for a much more complex and interesting mechanism that one can build that can drive a lot more value for for collectors as well as institutions. So if you're a collector and you have 20 different NFTs that have in-game assets, you will want to come to a singular place to manage those assets rather than going to 15 different websites to stake, unstake, claim, do different things. So we're building that singular place.
Well, that's very, very interesting. That's definitely an attractive offer because right now it does definitely feel very segmented, fragmented, I should say. So I will definitely be keeping my eye on that. I know that we are at time. If you are watching or listening to this, you want to go to monaxlabs.io to keep track of the topics that we just talked about, Cedar and Aspen. And you can also find them on Twitter as well at twitter.com/Aspen. It's actually Aspen FT. The N is used on both words. So anyhow,
Aspen
Casey,
NFT, one in.
yeah, Aspen NFT one N. Okay. But Casey, I really am glad we could finally connect. You're doing some really interesting cutting edge stuff here. So I appreciate your time, and I intend to continue taking a close look and also getting the alpha from Jeremy in the DMs. So I appreciate it very much.
Thank you very much for having me, Tandy.
All right. Take care.